Hello and welcome to today's Roundtable, the new guest experience, safe, seamless, and increasingly contactless. I'm Elaine Simon, Senior Managing Editor of Hotel Management, and today's event is sponsored by Onity. For years, mobile technology has been transforming the customer experience across industries, in particular hospitality. But the onset of COVID-19 has accelerated the need for digital transformation, moving mobile innovation from an amenity to a business imperative. During today's event, hospitality executives who are leading the charge to define a new era in guest experience will discuss the potential for mobile technology and the impacts and considerations for their brands, employees, and ultimately their guests. First with us today, we have Dan Morton, Vice President Guest Experiences at Hilton, where he's responsible for guest-facing technologies like digital key, connected room, and payments for Bose, a class-leading consumer audio company. He has also worked as a co-founder at consumer technology startups. Welcome, Dan. Next, we have Oliver Meinzer, Vice President Global Operations, Digital Guest Experience with Marriott International. Oliver joined Marriott in 2003, and in his current role, he oversees digital guest experiences for Marriott's global operations team, partnering closely with the digital and enterprise product leaders to deliver digital innovations to elevate the guest experience, streamline hotel operations, and increase customer loyalty for more than 7,000 hotels. Third, we have Josh Weiss, Vice President of Product for IHG Hotels and Resorts. In this role, Josh is responsible for development and support of IHG's guest-facing digital products and channels, including mobile applications, web experiences, in-room entertainment, guest Wi-Fi, loyalty CRM, and more. Josh joined IHG in 2019 from Hilton, where he was Vice President, Product, Brand, and Guest Technology, leading and supporting the development and launch of many products and services such as digital check-in and room selection, digital key, connected room, and Conrad Concierge. We also have on today's panel Fayyad Sbaihat, President of Carrier's Supra and Onity divisions. Fayyad has extensive technology leadership and automation experience in several industries and markets. He is responsible for the direct key portfolio of mobile credentialing and access management services. So welcome to all attendees and all panelists today. Thank you for your time today. I want to put one quick note in before we begin. Time permitting, we will do a Q&A at the end of the roundtable. So attendees, you can submit your questions using the Q&A tab on the left side of your screen. And you can do that anytime during the roundtable. So I guess we will get right into it. So COVID-19 has accelerated digital transformation across nearly every industry. How has digital transformation accelerated for each of you and in your roles? Dan, we'll start with you.
Sure, thanks. Hilton has been at the forefront of a lot of this digital transformation for many years. I joined about a year ago, right before COVID-19 began. And the most amazing thing that I've seen in terms of acceleration has been the way our guests have increasingly demanded and wanted to and sought out the digital technologies. Over the course of the last year, we've seen demand for digital key, for example, nearly double. We've seen a lot of guest demand for it in rate, even as occupancy's been down, and it's resonated really well. And so I think what we've seen internally is that there's a lot of excitement around our digital products and around the opportunity that we have to reach guests in new and exciting ways. And we're continuing to find ways to make sure every single time it works for everyone in every important use case that they have.
And excitement is good. After the past year, we all need some exciting things to get us through, I think.
Absolutely.
Oliver, how about you?
Yeah, similar to what Dan was mentioning, this had been a pretty significant focus within Marriott for a while now as well. But I think what last year in particular brought is awareness that there's a lot more beyond mobile key or digital key in the hotel experience that we have a great opportunity to transform the customer experience, make it easier for our guests, but also for our employees and associates to deliver a great service experience. So equally here, there's a lot of excitement around the company to drive this forward and use this renewed energy to make some significant investment in that space as well.
Mm-hmm. All right. How about you, Josh?
Yeah, I agree with everything that Dan and Oliver said. And I'll add that, the COVID significantly reduced the time horizon in which we had to take action. So the sense of urgency was significantly more. And that had the really positive side effect of really galvanizing internal teams and bringing us together and with our partners, to come up with very pragmatic near-term solutions. Some of those were technology enabled, but others were about process and about how we use our people and their skills in hotels to help deliver, a really clean, safe experience to our guests, and also to make sure that guests knew that. It's not just about doing the right thing, but it's about making sure that your audience knows that you're doing the right thing. So it really pulled us together and focused us. And to their points, there's so much more we can do going forward as well.
Mm-hmm. So Fayyad, you, I'm sure, have had to, speed up what you're working on to offer to the hotels. So what is this transformation meaning for you in your job?
We approach it from a slightly different perspective than our, customers, just mentioned. As a technology provider, we have seen a significant increase in interest around mobile credentialing in the past year. To Josh's point, it compressed the time horizon. It went from a nice to have luxury to a necessity very quickly. But we've also seen a lot of interest from outside the hospitality industry, other industries such as senior living, education. Quite a few other commercial markets have started becoming interested in similar solutions of mobile credentialing. But then there is also the process. We had to accelerate and compress a time in a period when we were not necessarily traveling or we had to social distance. So we devised several new solutions and processes around remote surveys of properties and remote installation processes and really getting creative. So we've had to revise the whole way we do this technology deployment process to enable it in this environment.
So what it sounds like is that for once, the hotel industry was the leader in this technology. That doesn't happen all the time. So the hotel industry kind of led everybody else into this new world, I guess. Nice.
From our experience, it has, absolutely.
Nice. That's exciting to hear. So then what are priorities you're discussing now that you'd never imagined you'd be discussing in a situation like this? Let's go with Oliver.
I think maybe less related to the digital experience, but having the goal to help you owners survive this as one of the top priorities. I didn't think that I would be in that spot, at least not a year ago when we went in. So that's definitely on the forefront. How do we make sure we keep our hotels alive? And then probably a little bit to what Josh was saying earlier. The priority is definitely around, well, how do we tell more of our guests, more of our customers hear the things we're doing through all the different channels that are available or not yet available that we have to create, because that level of trust is just important to restart the travel again. So that's probably something we focus on that we probably previously didn't spend too much time on. So that's been interesting. But then some other nuances too, the ability, even in our digital ecosystem, to respond quickly to government regulation changes. In some of these areas, they are new. We didn't have government regulation before that we now have to accommodate and make adjustments for. So that's an interesting challenge as well in this ever-changing world.
Mm-hmm. So speed is key. All right. Dan, how about you?
Yep.
Sure. Yeah, I'd say it's not so much that we hadn't imagined some of the priorities, but priorities is really a key word here. We've had to prioritize really carefully and ruthlessly as we've been focused on guest safety and comfort and making sure that we, as Oliver said, meet the requirements and regulations that have been popping up around us at different times. I think a couple of good examples of actions that we've taken here are we opened up digital key and the use of digital check-in and digital key to all guests, irrespective of where they booked or where the reservation came from, and that's opened up new opportunities for us to reach more people with a benefit that we see guests demanding, and it is clearly delighting them. Another example is, while safety's always been critical to our mission, the Clean Stay program that Hilton worked on with partnerships with Lysol, Dettol, Mayo Clinic, etc., has been an interesting way that we've thought about the priorities in a new way to ensure that we're delivering the very best that we can for our guests and listening carefully to what it is that they need to feel comfortable.
Mm-hmm. So a whole lot of competing priorities that all move to number one all at once, it sounds like. So, yeah. All right, Josh.
Yeah, I mean, in some sense, we all introduced clean programs. IHG Way of Clean was exactly that, and I would say, we use technology in some pretty low technology ways that actually added value. Even things like, digitally prioritizing the list for housekeeping colleagues and front desk colleagues in terms of checklists and things to make sure that all tasks were completed. And it seems like a pretty basic item, but it's really important in terms of helping someone do their job and make sure those details are all really well covered. Replacing, paper collateral with digital items. Again, not very innovative, but very essential to help reduce paper and things that required human touch in the system. Digital check-in was another example. Not so much that we rolled it out in a very compressed time period, but that we did it, much more quickly, perhaps, and leveraging a network of partners in ways that we probably wouldn't have necessarily been compelled to be that creative during normal business operations. So I'd say it's as much about the how we did things differently as it is about reprioritizing some of our areas of focus.
Mm-hmm. Okay. So Fayyad, what are you hearing from people about, discussions you're hearing about what they want coming up and what they need right now in what you offer?
A couple of things. So our number one priority remains that secure and streamlined mobile access process. Our customers still need that mobile check-in process and mobile key process to really work seamlessly and reliably every time to make sure that the customer experience is consistent and reliable and smooth every time they arrive. So we put a lot of focus to improve that, coming out with additional next generation of our core product to really improve that experience further. But we also moved a little bit broader. So we are in discussion with some of our customers today to really think about, now that we have this proliferation of mobile credentialing and use of mobile apps with the customers within the hospitality industry, how to leverage it to add more digital services that can make the customer experience safer and healthier. Those could potentially be things like density management or improving the elevator experience or getting the access to gyms and pools and other shared areas to really minimize, based on occupancy, of course, to minimize the touch points and the density of people in crowded places. So those are just a sample of some of the new services that just have come to the surface here recently. In terms of the healthy stay and healthy experience, we also, Carrier has a large campaign around healthy buildings, which Direct Key is part of that. And that goes beyond, beyond the mobile credentialing and the digital key to really more of the healthy stay. So, the Career Healthy Building Program focuses on the quality of air, air filtration, ventilation, smoke and particle detection. So in some areas, we're also introducing digital key as one complementary solution within that broader program. So I really think, emphasize the point my colleagues made here about the safety and health of the stay becoming a paramount decision point for the customer as they visit hotels today.
Mm-hmm. So many issues that no one even in a million years would have thought of a year ago, particles and things like that, like you mentioned. So it's broadening everyone's perspective, I think. So Josh, we'll start the next one with you. In what ways will hotel guest expectations be forever changed post-COVID-19? And what are the biggest challenges in meeting those needs?
I think the single most important way the expectations will be changed is just a totally new level of flexibility that guests expect from us. And sometimes in travel, historically, the rules haven't always been perceived as being flexible. And in this time, whether it's flexible booking and cancellation policies, whether it's flexibility in the ways the guests are able to book and check in for their stay, flexibility in meetings, right? Meetings and events will come back, but they'll take a different form, especially at first, in terms of hybrid meetings and events. So having products that are set up to cater to a mix of live and remote attendees and really help them all feel immersed in the experience. Food and beverage significantly changed. It's a really important part of our experience, but things like mobile ordering and ordering via our digital and in-room channels will speed up in prominence, and that won't go away. The printed menu may be gone forever, and that's okay. So I really do think flexibility, convenience, the ability to interact with us via digital channels in everything that they do, and also still have a personal human experience, which is something that won't change, but how we deliver it obviously will.
Mm-hmm. All right, Dan.
So yeah, at its core, we are in the business of people serving people, and that piece won't change. We will continue serving people in the most hospitable way that we possibly can. At the same time, I think many of the things that people are trying now, I mentioned the increased demand for the digital products and for flexibility and all the things that Josh just said as well. I think people will expect some of those things to say, and people's habits may change. People who try different digital channels for booking or for room access, et cetera, they're going to increasingly just build that into their habit. And I think we're going to find more of that over time. But I don't know that that's so much a complete change as much as an acceleration of change that was already on its way. And I think people will be watching the continuation of things like the clean stay and the different clean programs and so on. And people are going to come back to an expectation of, people serving people, of those really great interactions they have on property with people that can help them out when they need to.
Mm-hmm. All right, Oliver.
Yeah, I agree with everything that Josh and Dan were saying. I would actually go a little step further. I think the term trust is probably being redefined by our travelers in terms of what does it mean to trust a brand. Cleanliness and safety playing a much more critical role and in a different way than it was pre-COVID. But I also think a little bit to our earlier point, I think the expectation transfer from your day-to-day life into the travel world is going to be much more stringent. If they have the ability to do something contactless or through a digital channel in their day-to-day life, I think the expectation is they can do that when they travel and when they're staying in our hotels. So the patience level for us as an industry to make sure we implement and we innovate in this space is probably very low. So again, to an earlier point, our prioritization is changing and we have to deliver against that too.
Mm-hmm.
And that's
Okay,
going to be a
Oliver,
challenge given some of the financial constraints with our group, right? So we have to find the right balance in our prioritization and pace forward.
we actually will be discussing the financial aspect in a few minutes. But Oliver, to continue along with that, contactless in specific has been, a buzzword like we've said today. What does it look like now for hotels, and what is absolutely essential in terms of contactless?
I think most commonly you'll see the mobile check-in keyless entry is probably one of the predominant feature. It's also probably the one that has the most touch point associated with it from a customer interaction perspective. I think as we said earlier, prioritization is on really everything else, and I would add to that maybe a subcategory is around those areas where we might also drive incremental revenue for the hotels, like the F&B space. At least for our hotels that now have our food and beverage ordering solution, that growth in 2020 was probably about 300% year over year in terms of volume and revenue they generated. So we see a tremendous amount of growth and opportunity in that space to help our hotels, especially with some of these local restrictions that are in place from a food and beverage perspective. But in my opinion, everything is on the table in the future of contactless. We got to be very thoughtfully review every interaction in the stay experience, prioritize and figure out what's the right solution. And to Josh's point earlier, I think equally important here is we have to make sure in parallel we build out the ability to tell our customers at any stage in their travel. Is it planning? Is it as they travel to the destination and while they're in our hotels, to make sure there's clear awareness, what's available, when is it available, and what options they have, because that again facilitates the trust in the brand, and that'll be a critical component for success.
Mm-hmm. All right. How about Josh? Since he mentioned you, what is essential now, and also take a look at what will it look like in the future for contactless?
Yeah, I mean, I think essential a little bit is driven by, frankly, the ROI and business case for our hotel owners and operators, and they are, in large part small business owners. They're, it's a difficult market environment for them. So at the same time, guests are really driven by, seeking out a clean, predictable stay. We have to make sure that we're not just articulating value in terms of abstract guest satisfaction, but we're actually driving the business case and we're showing what the return on certain investments is. So having that really pragmatic lens, but at the same time agreeing on the things that are absolutely table stakes, right? The cleanliness protocols and technologies, the digital check-in capabilities, those things are table stakes and don't need to be debated, but we need to deploy them and scale them and add to them in ways that are very, very sensitive to the ROI for owners and operators.
Mm-hmm. All right, Dan, what do you see coming down the road as increasingly important for contactless?
Sure. So contactless starts, and maybe I'm stretching the definition of contactless, but it certainly starts from the communication that we have with the guests before they even get there, right? We need to be clear and concise about what can they expect, what will be predictable, what may be flexible or may be different than what their expectations are, if that's the case. The experience from there runs all the way through, right? From check-in to your room access and your digital key to in-room control of the devices and your television from an app, and then all the way to checkout and getting your folio. Over time, I think it's easy to imagine how we can continue to serve guests and simplify the more transactional elements of their stay through some of these technologies. At the same time, by simplifying these transactional elements through digital technologies, we empower and enable our hotel staff to increase the level of engagement and hospitality with guests on property. So I think there's an opportunity there to really nail the hospitable guest experience while bringing many of the transactional elements that we just have to have as part of any stay to a new and simpler method of operation.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Fayyad, how are you as a solutions provider pivoting to meet these needs that hotels are finding are now more critical than ever?
For me, what my colleagues just shared is exactly the direction we work towards. So our primary goal is to make sure the technology really enables these goals that they set for themselves and the experience they design for their customers. For us, the key focus is to make sure that the experience is the contactless experience is streamlined. We want the customer to have a very consistently smooth experience from driving into the parking garage, going into the elevator, walking up to their room with as few touch points as possible. And if we can accomplish that being consistent and reliable every time, we contribute significantly to the goals they set for themselves. But going beyond that, the having contactless experience in other shared spaces, public doors, integrating, the gyms, the pools, the business center, a lot of these shared spaces, the nature of the contact is no longer limited to just one individual going into their room. So we have to get creative with the solutions that we provide to enable, a contactless and manageable experience that ensures this type of support, and basically, a seamless and consistently reliable experience is at the core of all of these solutions.
Okay. So then what about? Go ahead. Go ahead.
No, thank you. No, I was going to say, for us today, we have deployed the direct key solution in more than 900,000 rooms across 5,000 different hotels around the world. So maintaining consistency for those customers as they go from one part of the world to another, and from one city to another, is going to be, a critical factor for the customer loyalty and the customer expectations coming in.
So familiarity will help, I would think, with adoption then, with people accepting all of the new technology. Okay.
Yes.
So then what about mobile technology? What role does that play in creating a post-COVID era guest experience? Josh?
Suffice it to say, it's a huge role. Mobile has become inextricably a part of our lives. It's the way we all move around and communicate, and more so than ever now. So mobile will play a really important role in that. It'll range from access solutions being the key, as it is in many cases already today, but also being a communication platform, both through AI and also live communication with hotel colleagues and getting the information and assistance you need. And I think we'll start to see, to that point, a lot more integration between, call centers and hotel colleagues, and each channel really helping each other communicate effectively with the guest. And to that end, and again, I know I've commented several times on the how mattering just as much as the what, but as we think about mobile, we are designing for an audience who is not just early adopters, digital natives, and those that have been using mobile for everything for a decade. We are designing for guests who may never have tried some of these capabilities, who are used to talking to a person for everything and still really value that human assistance, but also want to engage in a more contactless way. And so how do we design the tools to be really sensitive to the needs of a much broader audience and user-friendly across segments that perhaps wouldn't have even tried them just a couple years ago?
Mm-hmm. And now have no choice. So
exactly
making
right.
it easy for those people who have no choice, that will go a long way toward that welcoming, feeling that you were talking about earlier, that relationship. So
that's right.
All right, Oliver, what's your take on mobile?
Yeah, totally agree with what Josh said, but I would also expand that I see this also as the kickoff to a real focus on the employee side of our operations. Because that transformation that we see on the traveler side and the push towards mobile, we got to pull through the same thinking and strategies on the other side of our operation, enabling our employees to deliver a much elevated service experience to Dan's comment earlier, without being tethered to a physical location, to a desk. I think this will influence how we design hotel lobbies in the future. I think it'll have significant impact in cost to build hotels, because if we don't need to build front desks anymore, because we enable our employees to deliver that service on mobile devices. So equally to the customer facing, I think the focus also got to be on the employee facing side. And I think the post-COVID world will put an enormous focus on that as well.
Mm-hmm. How about at Hilton, Dan? You've been on the mobile train for a while now. So where's it going?
Yeah, I agree with everything I said. I mean, quite simply, right, to be customer led, we need to know what our guests, our customers are doing. And everybody does have a smartphone effectively, right? And that isn't a demographically limited statement. That's across all demographics. And most of our guests, most of our employees as well, all show up with mobile devices that they're using to more and more ends every day, right? And as we see people engaging these natural interaction methods in their life, they come to expect them in all of the contexts of their life, right? Many people there are many people who would be surprised if they couldn't digitally check into a hotel, right? And many who haven't tried it yet, but quickly adapt to it when they recognize they can do that. It's no different than the ways they're using their mobile phones at home as well. So, another piece that we could add and talk about is messaging. We're seeing, in many of our properties, people engaging messaging with the front desk or with the staff at the hotel. And a lot of people prefer that method of communication over others. I think there's no question that, and people, when they leave their house and you see survey after survey, they're more likely to bring their phone than their wallet, their phone than their keys, right? I think it's going to continue to be a critical part of the way people engage, and hospitality is no different than the rest of the world, I think.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and it is, you're right, it is an integral part of our life nowadays at all stages. For instance, I have a 15-year-old who her mobile never leaves her hand unless basically pried out of her hand. So she, and that's the up and coming, generation who's going to be buying hotel rooms. So that is not going to change. So everyone's mentioned F&B, and that is hotel F&B. Non-hotel F&B has undergone huge changes in the past year. Contactless, mobile, staffing for, delivering outside. How is, F&B really being impacted, and what's the future going to look like? Because as we know, things are going to change again, as things start to open back up more. So what are we looking at? Let's go with Dan this time.
Sure. So starting with the work that was done as part of Clean Stay and being super focused on safety and on meeting the regulations and restrictions that have come in place as part of COVID, we have made some temporary changes to our F&B offerings at many of our properties. And increasingly, many hotels you may see offer grab-and-go options or other kinds of F&B solutions that reduce the touch points between guests and staff. I think that's going to change and continue to change over time as we work our way through this and people get vaccinated and we get back to whatever normal looks like. But I think at its core, we're going to let our guests drive where this goes, right? they value the F&B offerings that we have, and we're going to seek to offer the best solution at the right time to our guests across the entire state.
Mm-hmm. Josh, I see you nodding your head. That's your kind of thought too?
Yeah, I mean, food and beverage is such an important piece of many of our brands. I mean, Kimpton has these amazing restaurant experiences that go right alongside amazing hotel experiences. And so how do we redefine that and keep the experiential element, but in a distanced world? Obviously, on the other end of the spectrum, the breakfast buffet has been a staple of Holiday Inn and Holiday Inn Express and other brands for many, many years. And so how do we redefine that in a prepackaged and, an easier way than everyone sharing at a buffet type of environment? And then, of course, technology comes into play with ordering capabilities, the ability to bill it right to your folio or pay with points, know via all of the digital channels, including mobile and the in-room TV, what's available, because the fundamental need that people have to eat, especially at late in the day when they're arriving at a property, we want to make sure that they have access to those services in a really easy and convenient way. And also, as recovery really starts to happen, that we're welcoming them back into the physical restaurants on property with an experience that is really designed for that. So enabled by QR codes and various payment solutions that, again, keep that live in-person dining experience a really excellent one, but also evolve it for the new world.
Mm-hmm. That new world will include also lots of, as you mentioned, people, arriving at their destination. A lot of people with kids who are, desperate to get out, and hungry kids and difficult to use F&B offerings are not a good combination. So I think that will help, business travelers, families, everybody.
Yeah, and the other thing I'll say is just an acceleration of the trend towards healthful options, because obviously this has placed, health of all types front and center, and people are increasingly wanting, fresh and healthy options to choose from, even late at night. You don't necessarily want your kid to eat Doritos, so having options that are really appealing and flexible, but healthy too, is very important.
Mm-hmm. Okay. What about Marriott's F&B future in terms of mobile contactless technology, Oliver?
Yeah, very, very similar sentiment here. I think we'll probably see a variation depending on what segment of the portfolio you go to, from luxury to the premium into the select brand area. Obviously, the menu offerings from a pre-packaged to somewhat full menu, I think that depends on occupancy. So having programs that you can expand on as occupancy increases will be important. I think technology is going to continue to play a critical role to what Josh mentioned, from a pre-ordering, contactless ordering, self-checkout, self-service grab and go like you see at airports already, all the way to your full-service restaurant experience, which you see to some degree in some of the Asia Pacific countries that are already in somewhat of a semi-normal state. I think we'll see a mixed bag of all of this, but technology will continue to drive the experience in there, from ordering to payments to information sharing, probably in some cases to contact tracing, right, from a hotel and as well as local customer perspective. So I think that they'll continue to stay with us. And the other element that plays a role too in the F&B world is the loyalty member benefits that have F&B components, and how do we make sure we continue to drive those benefits, the value proposition, and really entice the value of the program. I think that's going to be critical moving forward, and something that was said earlier, all in line with ROIs for the hotels and owners in terms of what makes sense at what level of occupancy, so we can find the right balance to deliver a good experience and a great experience for our guests, while not breaking the bank in our hotels in a very fragile state.
Mm-hmm. Okay. So what are the most critical evaluation criteria when you're looking at new contactless or mobile solutions? What are security, ease of use, et cetera? What are those main, items you're looking for? Josh?
Yeah, you said it first. Security is first and foremost because, all the traditional types of security remain just as important, even as we layer on these new types of health-related safety and security. So that's definitely one. Scalability is another. So how does this scale not just across multiple hotels, but across multiple brands in multiple geographies with different local regulations and perhaps customs? Sometimes things don't scale globally, but other times it's a matter of how we actually do it. So really starting with that global lens when something needs to become ubiquitous. I think the other thing is leaning into partnerships because we know we can't do nearly everything that we need to do in the time horizon we need to do it without leaning very heavily on a network of carefully selected partners. And certainly in the digital space, that's more important than ever, but really leveraging those partnerships, expertise from providers that range, from cleaning supply companies to digital and technology providers, and getting their expertise at the table is tremendously important. So those are things we prioritize. I mentioned it before, I'll say it again, owner ROI and value proposition as well. So having a really clear sense of which capabilities will most appeal to what guests want, but also be a very effective value proposition for owners. And in many cases, that means no incremental cost for owners. It's things that we can fund or leverage or develop in other types of ways. So being very, very, very ROI minded as we approach the capabilities.
Mm-hmm. Oliver, you nodded your head through all of that. Is that your top list also?
Yep. Yeah, it sounds very familiar. I think we're all in the same meetings on a daily basis. The one thing I would add to that list is the ongoing cost component, right? Because oftentimes we don't put enough attention around, well, we can build it, we can deploy it, we can do all these things, but then a year later, suddenly we get the bill of what it costs to actually maintain, support, and do all that, and sometimes that becomes an issue. So having these conversations, plans ahead of time to really get the full picture of what a solution costs, I think, especially with the financial state of the companies and our ownership, it's going to be even more under scrutiny to make sure that ROI really is comprehensive.
Mm-hmm. Dan, how about you? I see more nodding.
Yeah, a lot of agreement. It certainly starts with the safety and security of our guests and our staff, right? Of course, and all of the other things that are mentioned are really, really critical. A way that I like to think about a lot of these, almost everything that we look at is really in terms of what I describe as aggregate value, which is all of the benefits, the sum of all of the benefits that we're going to get out of this, whether for guests, for team members, et cetera, and the sum of the aggregate costs, right? So benefit over cost is how I would define value, right? And those costs are the initial costs, the ongoing costs, et cetera, and try to look at that in kind of a single big picture and go, all right, if you think about, when you were, I think probably all of us have been given the advice at some point in our life, well, if you're trying to make a decision, make a list of the positives and a list of the negatives, and then figure out which list is longer and what makes more sense. And, I don't know, in real life decisions, that's always hard for me to actually find value in personally. But in the context of single point decisions from a business decision and looking at criteria for why we would decide to do things, it's hugely informative, right? And it's a good way to determine the aggregate value of whatever you're considering.
Mm-hmm. Fayyad, are there any other evaluation criteria that you'd like to add to the list?
Yes, I mean, I largely agree with what my colleagues said. I think, security is paramount, cyber, personal, and physical. The other critical item is the scalability and that consistency of the experience, which I'm happy to say with Onity, direct key was used more than 100 million times to unlock doors around the world in more than 2,000 cities. So you think about the consistency of that experience across different brands, different flags, different scales of the properties, from the luxury to the economy, and so on. That is a huge factor in the customer loyalty. The other factor that I always encourage my customers to think about is what is their approach to service and support? Do you basically, when it comes to the installation and the deployment of the technology, the project management scale, the planning, the delivery, the sequencing of the rollout, there is a significant project management deployment associated with this type of endeavor. Lastly, not lastly, but another important item here is really the level of customization that the customer would seek or the hotelier would seek for their end user and for their guest. At Onity, we offer several levels of integration that would make this a really customizable experience. For example, the customer can use Onity's own direct key app in the case of a boutique hotel, but the direct key app can also be embedded within the loyalty app of a large flag that would be using that. Similarly, the direct key module and technology can also be integrated in a variety, in basically the popular door locks, and we did that to make sure we minimize the cost impact to the customers during an upgrade. So at a minimal cost, they can upgrade whatever existing door lock or door lock type they have and retrofit it with the Onity direct key solution that can provide that consistent customer experience regardless of the type of hardware they're using or the type of PMS or property management system they're utilizing for that individual property. Cost, I agree, providing an understanding of the return on investment, being able to roll out the right features for the property or for the type of business engagement. Not all properties need all the features. For example, additional services around mobile key would be, could potentially get into the customization of the guest experience. Not all hotel types require that type of luxury, and we need to make sure that there is a tiering or at least a customization level that manages the costs accordingly.
Mm-hmm. Okay, wonderful. Well, I want to go to the Q&A now from the audience. We have several great questions. For these, we'll do this. If you want to answer this, raise your hand, and that way we'll get your voice heard. The first one, how far can the industry push to enable more digital touch points on property, such as voice assistants that will help to operate rooms, but also call for services? Anyone involved in that? Josh, go for it.
Yeah, I mean, I think there's a lot of capabilities in voice assistants, in AI, and in other types of capabilities, dependent on the architecture and the cost, right? So things that involve incremental hardware in rooms that need to be deployed and maintained will be very few, and they'll be exactly the right ones. Things that leverage cloud-based capabilities and networks and that don't have large incremental costs to scale across huge numbers of rooms and properties, but deliver a really good multilingual, engaging guest experience will frankly scale very well. And that includes both voice capabilities, perhaps different types of messaging, and other text capabilities. The key is really the efficiency of scale and minimizing the footprint of hardware on property.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Anyone else want to tackle that one? All right, go for it, Dan.
I'll add on a little bit. I think the the opportunity isn't so much for the industry to push, but the industry to seek what guests are going to be engaged in and want to engage in, right? So speaking for myself, we're going to look at, and we are looking at, any number of potential exciting technologies that could bring real benefits to guests, and we're going to seek whether or not those can be deployed in ways that meet the criteria that we talked about earlier, right? I don't think there's necessarily a fixed limit on what opportunities we can reach out to and try to engage, but we have to do it in concert with where our guests are at any given moment, right?
Mm-hmm. Okay. All right, next question. Does the panel find that there is a certain percentage of guests who just will not adopt digital? How do you message to those guests on the tail end of the adoption curve? And what do you do if they just refuse? I suppose they could always just go somewhere else, but if you're hoping to keep those people as customers, what do you do? Anybody? All right, Dan.
Sure. So I've worked in consumer technology for pretty much my whole life and watched transition after transition happen and adoption after adoption of different kinds of technologies. And yeah, there's always people that adopt later. There's always people that adopt earlier, and there's always the mass adoption that happens there in the middle. I think we're going to find for some time there are going to be people that they aren't going to want to adopt the digital technologies. They are going to want to continue to call or continue to have those more manual experiences that they've had in the past. And I think that's okay. I think from my standpoint in at Hilton and hospitality, I've said this, we're a business of people serving people. We need to meet our guests where they are. We need to serve them where they are. We believe that many of these experiences that we're talking about today, and we're convinced, are actually really great experiences and are going to simplify and delight our guests and most of our guests in many, many ways. But for a variety of reasons, some people will choose to hold off a little bit longer. And I don't see any harm or any concern from that. I think we embrace them like we embrace everybody else. And we support them with, whatever it is they need. If people want plastic keys, we're going to give them plastic keys. We think there's a great way for them to access their room digitally, but we're not going to tell them they can't get into their room otherwise. That's antithetical to the whole business.
Mm-hmm. Oliver?
Yeah, I 100% agree. I think at the end of the day, it's all about giving our guests options and leave it up to them how they want to engage with us. But making all these options meaningful and deliver the same level of service and experience, no matter what option you choose. But also in the design process for the digital experience, we got to make sure we have options out there that can ease guests into the digital ecosystem that might not be ready yet for a digital key, but they're willing to look at the restaurant menu through a QR code, right, to get them started, and then start expanding what they're looking at and say, hey, there's actually more benefits if I stay in the digital ecosystem. Then they start to connect the dots between what's on their device, what's on the guest room TV, what's on the hotel website, when they connect to the internet, and these kind of things. I think we can gradually create that level of trust that the digital experience delivers a comparable, if not superior, level of service and convenience to our guests.
Okay. All right, this one's for Josh. You mentioned communication platforms on mobile. Do you see a push to video chats between colleagues and guests?
That's a great question. I think video is often, assumed to be the proxy for in-person experiences, just like what we're doing here. We might all be on a stage in some other world, and here we are on video. And I think that's sometimes the case, but I do think video gets pushed too much as a transactional service capability when in fact bandwidth and just form factor, right? Holding your phone up while you're actually moving around and engaging with the person on video while kids do it on FaceTime all the time, it may not be the most effective way for people to move around. So I want to be careful about, when and how we think about it. Again, bandwidth and other pragmatic concerns, but sometimes texting is actually much more efficient and effective, both AI enabled and human enabled texting, because a really good colleague can support 4 or 5 guest interactions at one time. So the speed is much quicker. The path to resolution of whatever question the guest had is much quicker. So I'm skeptical about how much video can scale. I definitely think in certain, especially luxury and boutique experiences, it may have a valuable place.
Okay. Here's a good one. How are owners responding to the additional investment required to implement contactless technologies, especially during this low demand period? You've all talked about it a bit about, and touched on it. So is there anything feedback that you're getting, from the owners? Dan, what are you hearing?
Sure. So, our owners are, we're hearing first and foremost, it's a really challenging time. And as I think someone else said, most of our owners are small business owners, right? They have 50 or fewer people working for them, and they're worried first about making payroll and making sure that they can serve their staff and the guests that they do have. At the same time, by and large, they're excited about these technologies, right? We're hearing from our owners that digital key, digital check-in, these contactless arrival, contactless departure, those are resonating really well, and those are part of their path to recovery. And we're supporting them through that, right? The conversations are, it's a hard time, but the conversations are productive. Our job isn't to convince or push. Our job is to work with them, in collaboration with them, to a positive end that meets the needs of the guests, meets the needs of their staff. Their staff are generally stretched right now. Staff is thin, and we're trying to develop for them and work with them to make their properties more efficient, make them hospitable and welcoming, and give them the tools they need so that they can recover effectively and get to this future after the pandemic.
Mm-hmm. Okay, Oliver?
Yeah, similar to Dan's point, a lot of collaboration. I mean, obviously, none of us would want one of our owners to go belly up because we make them invest in any of these projects. That's absolutely not anywhere what we want. So the collaboration and making sure we find creative solution, we focus on the ROI, we focus on setting our owners and hotels up for success. So when occupancy returns, that we are in the best possible solution for them. So similar as with Dan, conversations that we're having are all around how do we get there together? How do we find creative ways to support the investment and alternative ways to pull that through to make sure we set them up for success. But challenging conversations, no doubt. Yes, they are small businesses. We're hearing from owners that are using their personal credit cards to make payroll. So it's really hard for them. So being, sensitive to that and work your way through is critical.
Mm-hmm. So communication in all directions, to the guests about what you're doing and what you're offering, to your owners, to the franchisees. It's just seems like communication is the biggest, imperative right now, I think, from what everyone's saying. Great. Well, that actually takes us to the end of our hour. So I want to thank all of the panelists so much for all of your time and your information that you've shared today. I want to thank all of the attendees for spending this hour with us. And I'd also like to thank Onity for sponsoring this roundtable. I think a lot of great information came out of it. We look forward to seeing you at future events, and have a great rest of your day. Thank you.
Thank you all.
Thank you.
Thank you.